Hi everybody and welcome to the Flute Practice. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about what it means to be a musician. How do we deal with the pressure of being a musician? This is going to be a little bit of a kind of exploratory process. We're going to just kind of talk through it a little bit and see where that takes us. So let's go check it out. I remember a little while ago I heard somebody saying that they were reading this article, or it's one of those definitely alternative facts, because I've subsequently not found the actual article that said this. Maybe one of you will, but basically that being a musician is one of the most stressful careers that you can have. It was like the top 5 most stressful professions or something, which seems crazy. You're just playing music, nobody's dying, you're not killing anybody, you're not doing anything crazy. But when I started to really think about that, there was definitely an element of truth in this. If we think about what we do as musicians, so on the one hand, we're performing all the time, right? We've got concerts coming up, we've got auditions, maybe we've just even got our lessons or whatever. This is a constant state of like nervous anxiety, of like pressure, having to perform well, having to be at our best peak performance the whole time. So we've got this element. At the same time, I think the very act of performing, the very act of performance or of giving of yourself in that way is an incredibly vulnerable experience. We make ourselves incredibly open and vulnerable to audiences, to, our teachers, to whoever is listening. And I think this is in and of itself is quite a stressful activity. We invariably identify hugely with what it means to be a musician, with our identity as a musician. And we're going to discuss this a little bit in a moment, about this line between, who am I and who am I as a musician? Because I think this is kind of part of the crux of where this can all go really, really wrong. I think one of the most important questions I had to ask myself in this process was, why do I want to be a musician? Why do I play music? What are my reasons for this? I remember my journey with this started actually a few years ago. I was about 18 years old and I decided I wanted to go study overseas. Now here in South Africa, very small music community, some fantastic musicians, but it's a small community, especially compared to international standards. And generally a lot of musicians that live here, we kind of tend to be big fish in the small pond kind of a thing. And I think for most of us, if not all of us, we go overseas and it's this like huge shock realization of, small fish in this massive pond. And I remember, going overseas and experiencing this and feeling very disillusioned and wondering, why on earth do I even want to study music? And I spent an entire year really trying to decide what I wanted to do with my life. What do I even want to be? What do I really want to study music? Or is this just something that I've been told I want to do? Or it's just because I couldn't think of anything better to do? And I was really at the point I actually wanted to give up. I was like, I'm going to stop playing music. I don't want this in my life anymore. And I remember a teacher of mine, she said to me, probably the wisest words I will ever hear. She said to me, she actually got quite angry with me. Everyone else was like, yeah, figure it out. It'll be fine. You'll figure it out. She was like, no, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you thinking? And she said to me, playing music is not about being the best. It's not about being better than everybody else or about being the best flute player in the world or whatever. She said, you have your own special musical voice. You have something to say. And that is what's important. And your gift of being able to say something through your music, and nobody else in this world can say it like you say it. And I remember at the time, I did not want to hear this. I was like, I'm not doing music. I don't need this in my life. And it's only really in the last few years that this is really kind of like sunk in and internalized. And to be honest, I started studying music and I still kind of felt like I don't really know. I had a bit more time to think about other things to do, still didn't really have anything better to do with my life, so music it was. So I started studying, and it was only then in 3rd year of my studies that I went overseas again. I went to master classes and confronted with the same issue. Why do I want to be a musician? Why do I play the flute? Or why do I study music in this case? And I really had to start answering this question. And to be honest with you, it's taken a few years for me to really answer this question. And I'm going to share my answer with you in a moment. But I want you to spend a little bit of time thinking about this first. So maybe even just pause this video, go for a walk or something, and just really think about, why do you play music? The next part of dealing with the pressure of being a musician, once you've answered this question for yourself, is looking at how we identify as a musician. I think this is a lot easier to do once you've answered that question, so we'll get back to that in a moment. But is being a musician all of who you are as a person? So, in other words, if you mess up in a concert or an audition or whatever, does that reflect directly to who you are as a human being? Does that make you a bad person, or a lesser person, or less valuable, or less lovable even? And I think probably most of your instinctive reactions are like, no, of course not. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? But really think about this for a moment. Think about life without music. Would you still be you? Would you still be a person? And it's difficult because as a musician, we are so kind of inextricably intertwined with this being a musician, and it's who we are, and it absolutely is who we are. But we have to be so careful that it isn't all of who we are, that there is a huge part of us that just is us, and that music is and always remains something that we do. And it's a huge part of what we do, generally in life, and it is a big part of our lives, but it is still just something that we do. It is not ultimately everything that we are. This is a very, very difficult kind of thing to pull apart, and there's actually research to back that musicians that can pull this apart, that musicians that can hold their identity separate from what they do as a musician, are much more mentally stable, much more sort of happier in their jobs, much sort of healthier, generally mentally healthier. Mentally healthier sounds weird. I think this is something, once again, I'm going to encourage you just to go and think about this. What is the difference between who you are and what you do as a musician? So I'm going to get back a little bit to my answering my question. And I think the point that I've got to in my life now is realizing that for me, music, playing music, teaching, doing these videos, everything that I do centered around music is an act of giving. It's an act of service for me. I feel that as a musician, my job in this world is to serve humanity, to serve human beings, to serve my students, to serve you, to serve people. And perhaps this is very idealistic, but I think when I started to see it as a service, as an act of service, as an act of giving, it took away a lot of the pressure of performance anxiety even. It took away the pressure of who I am as a teacher, or the frustrations of being a teacher. It took away the frustrations of just everyday life stuff. And it also became no longer kind of like a who I was as I wasn't a musician anymore. I was a person who wanted to serve. And the music became like this vessel, or this medium with which I can serve. And so no longer was I a reflection of my music, but the music became a reflection of who I was as a person. And I think this is such an incredible process to go through. I am not telling any of you that this is your process, or this is how you should think and feel about your music making. Maybe music making is just a way for you to become the best version of yourself, or, any of those things. I am going to just spend a little moment of caution and say, if music is for you a way to be the best, if music is a way for you to be better than everybody else, or is a way for you to kind of like make yourself feel great, or boost your confidence, or all of those things, you may run into quite serious trouble, because the reality of life is there will always be somebody that is better than you. There is always going to be someone who's not as good as you. But measuring yourself up against other people, the classic kind of like Facebook comparative lifestyle, is incredibly dangerous and incredibly risky in terms of your long-term happiness and health. So I'm going to urge you on this first step of looking why we, are musicians, why we do this, to really think carefully about why you want to play an instrument and why you want to be a musician. Cool, everybody. That was just a little bit of kind of food for thought, a little bit of meanderings and thoughts. Please comment, share your stories, share your experiences as you start to think about all of this, and we will check back in a couple of weeks with a little build-up series on this. Until then, happy practicing, everybody, and see you next time.